The bold and the beautiful, the balcony fall, Brooke's arrest, and the ultimate Forrester betrayal. It was meant to be a celebration, an extravagant evening at the Forrester estate, where champagne flowed, laughter echoed through the marble halls, and every camera in Los Angeles fixated on the house that fashion built. Rich Forrester stood at the center of it all, flanked by family, executives, and press. The event marked the official launch of the new Forrester Legacy line, a collaboration designed to bridge generations, with Ridge overseeing the past and Steffi and Thomas poised to shape the future. But beneath the glamour and speeches, tension festered like rot under gold. And by midnight, everything had collapsed. Literally. Ridge fell from the second-floor balcony during a heated argument that had everyone in the house whispering and watching. A scream ripped through the estate as his body hit the ground. Blood on stone. Silence. Chaos. Paramedics rushed in, but it was too late. Ridge Forrester was pronounced dead on the scene. And almost instantly, suspicion turned toward one person, Brooke Logan. Everything pointed to her. Earlier that night, Ridge and Brooke had been seen in a fierce argument, witnessed by multiple guests. It wasn't the first time, but this one had ended differently. Loud voices. Shouts of betrayal. A shattered wine glass. And when investigators swept the balcony, they found a single crystal tumbler with Brooke's fingerprints on it, lying just inches from the railing, smeared with Ridge's blood. Within hours, she was arrested. Thomas Forrester delivered the final blow. He told the police he'd overheard his father yelling that he could no longer trust Brooke. That he was tired of her poisoning this family. That he was done with the lies, the Logan manipulations, the endless back and forth. Thomas claimed he'd seen Brooke storm out onto the balcony and confront Ridge. That minutes later, he heard a loud crash. That she had motive, opportunity, and anger enough to push Ridge to his death. The city turned on her. The press flooded the headlines. Fatal fall at Forrester Mansion. Fashion mogul murdered? Brooke Logan behind bars. Paparazzi followed Hope and Donna, shoved microphones in Steffi's face, harassed RJ at school. Ridge's funeral was a media circus. Brooke wasn't allowed to attend. From her cold, dim cell, she watched it play out on the small television bolted to the wall. Thomas standing front and center, stoic. Taylor weeping. Eric broken. Steffi flanked by bodyguards. But there was no casket. No body. Only a portrait of Ridge, lit by candlelight. Because Ridge wasn't dead. Unknown to everyone but one man, Ridge Forrester had survived the fall. And it hadn't been an accident. It was a trap. Carefully constructed. Deliberately executed. And Thomas Forrester was the architect. He had planned it for months. Staged the fall. Paid off a private medic. Faked the death records. Used Ridge's unconscious body to manipulate a story that no one would dare question. All to remove one person from their lives, Brooke. Thomas wanted her gone. Permanently. Not out of love. Not out of jealousy. Out of strategy. Brooke was the last barrier between him and total control of Forrester Creations. Between him and the family empire. He saw the company slipping into her hands through Ridge's affection, and he couldn't let that happen. So he played the long game. He convinced Ridge that Brooke had betrayed him again. He replayed old manipulations. Planted seeds of distrust. Faked messages. Edited footage. And when the time was right, he invited the world to a party built on lies. He waited until Brooke and Ridge fought publicly, knowing it would happen. He spiked Ridge's drink with a sedative. Led him to the balcony under the guise of private conversation. And then pushed. Not to kill. To remove. Ridge woke up in a private facility in Big Bear, restrained and drugged, told by Thomas that he had survived, but that Brooke had tried to kill him. that the world believed him dead, that he had only one choice: stay hidden, rebuild in secret, and let Thomas protect what he'd built. For weeks, Ridge remained dazed and confused, disoriented by medication, unsure of reality. Thomas controlled everything: his food, his communication, his perception. Ridge tried to reach out, but every message was intercepted. Every scream for help was silenced. Meanwhile, Brooke sat in jail awaiting trial. Hope tried to prove her innocence. Liam offered help but warned her about digging too deep. Donna hired a private investigator, but they hit walls at every turn. Thomas had covered his tracks. Every piece of evidence corroborated the lie. But secrets don't stay buried in Los Angeles. RJ began to suspect something. A shared glance. An overheard call between Thomas and a mysterious contact. A cryptic GPS ping on his father's phone months after the death. He brought the data to Hope, and together, they began digging. They retraced the events of the party, reviewed surveillance footage, hacked into Thomas's private accounts. What they found stunned them: payment records to a medical facility that didn't exist, phone logs that led to a remote cabin, security footage deleted and re-edited. Then came the breakthrough. A single photograph from a delivery driver taken outside the cabin. A man who looked exactly like Ridge, alive. Frail, but very much alive. Hope and RJ raced to the location. They found Ridge. Weak, confused, but conscious. He looked up at his son and whispered one word: Brooke. The rescue was fast. Authorities raided the cabin. Thomas was gone, vanished before they arrived. Ridge was taken to a secure medical facility, and within days, the news broke. Ridge Forrester was alive. Brooke was innocent. Thomas had staged the entire thing. The world reeled. Brooke was released. She emerged from the courthouse not in triumph, but in devastation. The woman the world had branded a killer walked free, scarred, exhausted, betrayed beyond belief. She was reunited with Ridge in a tearful moment of silence. He apologized. She didn't answer. Because something had changed. Brooke had spent weeks in isolation, reflecting on a life lived under the shadow of the Forrester name. She was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being the scapegoat. Tired of loving a man who never defended her. Thomas, now on the run, became the most wanted man in California. A warrant was issued. His photos plastered across every news outlet. But he was careful. And he was gone. Back at Forrester Creations, Steffi stepped in to stabilize the brand. Taylor vanished from public life. Eric retired. And Ridge, recovering slowly, refused to return to the company just yet. He needed to rebuild his health, his name, and the trust he had burned. Brooke stood at the edge of it all. Free. But forever changed. Her name had been cleared, but her heart was no longer certain. The man she had fought for, lost, and defended had not trusted her when it mattered most. And as she walked away from the press that day, she turned to Hope and said, "Maybe it's time I start living for myself." And so the fallout began, not just of a faked death, but of a fractured dynasty, a family poisoned by ambition, and a woman who refused to be destroyed by the lies of men. The bold and the beautiful had never been more brutal. And it was far from over. The bold and the beautiful, Hope's plea, Carter's gamble, and the verdict that could destroy everything Hope Logan had endured heartbreak before. She'd seen men she loved betray her, watched her family shatter, and carried the burden of forgiveness longer than anyone ever should. But nothing had prepared her for the moment her mother, Brooke Logan, stood in handcuffs, accused of murdering the man she loved. A crime Hope knew deep in her soul Brooke could never commit. The evidence was damning. The shattered glass, the fingerprints, The loud public argument, and worst of all, Thomas's carefully planted testimony had done its job. Public opinion had turned. The Forresters, most of them, had turned. Steffi remained cautious. Taylor was silent. Eric stayed away. The company held its breath, and in the middle of it all, Hope was screaming into a storm no one wanted to hear. But she refused to give up. With Ridge presumed dead and Brooke locked in a jail cell awaiting trial, Hope did what she had to do. She went to Carter Walton. Carter, the trusted Forrester Creations COO and legal counsel, was caught between impossible loyalties. He had history with the Forresters, a bond with Ridge, and professional ties that ran deep. But he also had a moral code, one Hope knew she could reach. She stormed into his office, eyes red, voice cracking, and dropped to her knees. "Please," she whispered. "You know her. You know my mother. She didn't kill him. I need you to help me prove it." Carter hesitated. He'd already been pressured by Steffi to let the system work. Thomas had been unrelenting before his disappearance. The Forresters wanted peace, not scandal. And if Brooke's trial moved forward, it meant the company could claim closure. But Carter saw something in Hope's face he couldn't ignore: conviction. He agreed to take the case. Immediately, he dove into the evidence with fresh eyes. What he found disturbed him. The timeline was shaky. The forensics were oddly convenient. Thomas's statements had gaps that didn't add up. The surveillance footage was missing 5 minutes of balcony coverage. And the medical examiner's report had been filed by someone with a past connection to Thomas. Carter called in favors. He reopened the crime scene. And then came the break. A report from a private paramedic who had vanished the night Ridge was declared dead. Hope, working in parallel with RJ, had traced a supply run to a remote cabin. A blurry photo. A figure resembling Ridge. And then the truth exploded. Ridge Forrester was alive. Hope brought that photo to Carter, who immediately petitioned the court. But the legal system didn't move quickly. The judge wanted verified proof. Without Ridge physically present, Brooke remained in custody. That night, Hope broke down in Carter's office, sobbing. "I can't lose her," she said. "Not to them. Not to this lie." Carter made a choice. He went around the courts. He flew to the last known coordinates on Ridge's GPS, coordinates Hope had retrieved through RJ's search. What he found was the cabin, abandoned. But in a back room, Ridge, disoriented, weak, but alive. It took hours to convince him. Ridge didn't know what was real anymore. Thomas had drugged him, manipulated his emotions, kept him isolated, and convinced the world had turned on him. But when Carter showed him the arrest report for Brooke, the photos of her behind bars, the newspaper headline declaring her a murderer, Ridge's eyes cleared. He agreed to return. Back in Los Angeles, the courtroom was packed. The trial had begun. The prosecution laid out a narrative. Brooke, fueled by jealousy, rage, and betrayal, had shoved Ridge in a moment of anger. They painted her as impulsive, manipulative, dangerous. Hope watched her mother sit in silence, shoulders square, jaw clenched, eyes dry. She wasn't just fighting the state, she was fighting decades of stigma. Then Carter entered the courtroom with Ridge. Gasps echoed. Phones clicked. Cameras flashed. The judge nearly lost control. The trial was halted. Brooke stared, speechless. Ridge walked slowly toward her. She stood. They looked at each other for a long, silent moment. And then she collapsed into his arms. The case fell apart instantly. The charges were dismissed. The state filed an emergency motion to investigate the false evidence. Thomas was now wanted not only for obstruction of justice, but for kidnapping and conspiracy to commit fraud. An international warrant was issued. Brooke was released. Hope ran to her. The embrace between mother and daughter was raw, shaking, cathartic. Brooke, once again free, gave all the credit to her daughter. "You saved me," she whispered. "You didn't let them bury me." But the war wasn't over. The Forresters were fractured. Ridge's return didn't heal, it reopened wounds. Eric was devastated that his family had been so easily fooled. Steffi stepped down from leadership. Taylor vanished from the public eye. The brand was stable, but the soul of the company was in crisis. And Brooke? She didn't return to Ridge. Not immediately. Too much had been broken. Too many silences, too many betrayals. Ridge had doubted her, again. And this time, it had nearly cost her everything. "I love you," he said. "But I need to earn you back." Maybe, Brooke said. Or maybe I'm done being earned. Hope returned to Forrester Creations not just as a designer, but as a woman transformed. She had stood against an empire. And won. But she knew Thomas was still out there. And when he returned, it wouldn't be for peace. It would be for power. But now she was ready. And if the Forresters wanted a war, she'd give them one. Because blood may build a name. But truth burns louder than any legacy.